respected friend, thank you so much for your kind participation in today's Swadhyay Chakra dialogue. And today is a very interesting topic. Today, the topic of today's talk is this book, just published by Dr. Saumitra Basu and Michelle Moivik. And the topic of today's Swadhyay Chakra dialogue is consciousness-based psychology, Sri-Aurobindo's visions of yoga, health, and transpersonal growth. It is a pleasure to invite Professor Ananta Giri, moderator and chair of today's session, Professor Dr. Ronald, Professor Dr. Saumitra Basu, the author and psychiatrist, Somayaji, our inspiring soul. And because of his initiative, we are organizing this program. I welcome Professor Anant Kumar Giri, Dr. Gyan Goloi, Sigleria, Minti Pradhanji, Professor Nilika, Professor Amresh, Professor Navneetji, and all friends co-present here. Let me give a brief introduction to our speaker. Dr. Saumitra Basu is a consultant psychiatrist, and his engagement with psychology, particularly philosophical psychology, I would say, and his works on consciousness paradigm in health and psychology from Sri-Aurobindo's perspective. And he has authored a book called Integral Health, and along with Dr. Michelle, he's also one of author of this book from US, and he has authored this book, which we are going to talk about. That is the consciousness-based psychology, Sri-Aurobindo's vision of yoga, health, and transpersonal growth. And over 3 decades, he has been working on the consciousness perspective in psychology and counseling. He's the honorary editor of NUM, which is a journal of integral health, and one of the founding director of Sri-Aurobindo's International Institute of Integral Health and Research, Pondicherry. And he has attended so many workshops and delivered so many talks in national and international level. Let me also give a brief introduction to our circle, which is called Swadhyay Chakra. It is a circle of self and mutual studies, which is an initiative of studying and learning together self, culture, societies, and the world. Our friends associated with this are eager to walk and mediate with new horizons of thinking and new movements of social and cultural change at work in our contemporary world. We are study seekers such as Sri-Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, Chitranjan Das, a creative soul from Odisha, and many others from around the world. We also present our own writings and reflect upon our creativity together. We also invite seekers from different fields of life to share with us their lives, visions, sadhana, and struggles for creating a world of beauty, dignity, and dialogue. We meet every Sunday or sometimes on Wednesday. So with this brief introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Saumitra Basu to share his reflections on this very, very special book on Sri-Aurobindo. And you know, we are also celebrating 150 years of Sri-Aurobindo's philosophy. And this is a very relevant, and this is a kind of great and sincere work in terms of understanding his philosophy and psychology. So we invite Dr. Saumitra Basu to share his thought on this particular book. Yes.
Thank you. And thank you all for all of those who are present here today. So this work is a long work, This work has been going on for over 30 years, and we have presented some portion of this work in this book, along with my friend Dr. Michael Mayovic, who is a US-based psychiatrist, but who is also deeply interested in the same subject. And basically, we were wanting to construct a consciousness paradigm psychology, a school of psychology, or a method of psychology which is based on Sri-Aurobindo's system of consciousness. And Sri-Aurobindo has not himself written a book on psychology. He has not written that himself, but we are constructing it from his works, from his different impressions of human life left, his and the mothers. So it is a work compiling the Sri-Aurobindo and the mother's view of the human being, of his problems. And basically we started with a famous what you call thing, which is Sri-Aurobindo's original contribution to the world of psychology, that is the structure of the being. The structure of the being is a very comprehensive structure he has given of the being. When we talk about the human being in Indian philosophical terms, we don't talk about personality, we talk about the word being, because the being has a dimension of personality and the being has a dimension of impersonality too. So there are both personality and impersonality. So it's better to use the word being. And the structure of the being, he has given a very comprehensive vision of the structure, that is the outer person, the outer being, which we all know, which is bound by the ego. And behind the outer being is the inner being. Now, this behind the inner being is the inmost being. Now, the inmost being is the soul essence, or the what we call the central point where all things unite. And between the soul essence and the outer being, there is an inner being which can be developed. And this inner being is something that was known in fragments so long. It was, of course, not something not unknown. It was not something, it was totally unknown. It was not like that. It was known in fragments, in piecemeal. So he collected everything together and he constructed an inner being behind the outer being. And this inner being has an inner mind. It has got an inner vital. Vital is the plane of consciousness which contains our life energy, our dynamism, our emotions and passions and all that, and our physical. So it has got these three. And this inner being and outer being are totally different things. Mind you, they are totally different things. The outer being also has got an outer physical, outer vital, and outer mental, mediated by the ego. That is studied as personality in Western psychology. But Indian psychology moves forward, I would say, moves forward to construct a inner being behind the outer being. And the true Indian psychology starts from the inner being, from the inner mind, which has got provisions of gaining knowledge other than reason and sensory perception. You see, our mind knows things by sensory perception and reason. That's how we get knowledge. But then we can get knowledge by other ways also. That is also one of the hallmarks of Indian philosophy, that there are other ways of acquiring knowledge other than sensory perception and reason. These are called the suprarational ways of acquiring knowledge. And these suprarational ways of acquiring knowledge, Sri-Aurobindo has constructed them in a very phased manner. And these supracognitive matrices, he has actually made an evolution of the cognitive structure itself. The cognitive structure itself undergoes an evolution. So there are supracognitive matrices. The supracognitive means that which rise above the mind. So there are matrices of the consciousness and force. They together form the matrix. And there are matrices like that beyond the outer mind, that is in the inner mind, and then again it soars beyond the inner mind. The inner mind goes above to the superconscious, and the inner being The inner mind is in the inner being. The inner being goes up to the superconscious, goes down to the inconscious, and sideways it goes to the cosmic consciousness. So it goes upwards to the superconscious, downwards to the inconscious, and sideways to the cosmic consciousness. And when it goes upwards, it builds these supracognitive matrices. So there are these higher minds than the mind that we know. So that is a mind that he has structured these minds, that from the higher mind, there is a higher mind which is a mind of mass ideation. There's an illumined mind above the higher mind. That is an intuitive mind. There is true intuition, not intuition ordinary as we say, but true intuition where uh, very superior kind of thoughts, ideas can come and get translated into intuition, and then they get translated down when they come. When they come to the level of mind, they get diluted. That is another thing. But that is this intuitive mind. And above the intuitive mind is the mind of what Sri-Aurobindo called the overmind, which is the superconscious cosmic consciousness, the superconscious cosmic mind, and beyond that again is the supermind. So all these things will be get complicated. I will not talking about them in details here, but this inner mind has got this advantage that it can grow beyond our mental structure as that we form today, that we are conversant today. And then we have an inner vital. An inner vital has got a life energy which is directly connected with the energy in the cosmic consciousness. So in the cosmic consciousness, there is the cosmic energy, and this cosmic energy can get connected with the individual life energy, and then our individual energy can get uh, um, oh, expanded in its scope, in its working. And then there is a very difficult thing, that is the inner physical or the subtle physical. The inner physical or the subtle physical is a very new concept. Has been developed by Mother and Sri-Aurobindo, and who talked about the cellular consciousness, about the consciousness of the cells, of the consciousness of the body, which is behind the outer body. So behind the outer body is the subtle body, and the subtle body has got a subtle dimension, has got a subtle consciousness of which we are not aware. So we are aware of the outer body, we are aware of the outer consciousness of the outer body, but the subtle consciousness of the inner body is completely unknown to us. For that, it has to be developed. You see, the mother had worked on this, on the cellular consciousness, on the consciousness of the cells, and she had embarked on this venture to create something in the subtle physical, which could be later reproduced into the physical consciousness. So it is a very vast subject. It is a very vast subject, but it is something totally new. So that inner being has got an inner mind, an inner vital, and inner physical. And behind the inner being, behind the inner being is the inmost being or the soul essence, which supports the inner being. The inner being cannot be supported by the ego. The inner being cannot be supported by the ego. And what is the connection between the inner being and the outer being? The inner being and the outer being are connected by channels of communication are there between the inner being and the outer being. And these channels are mostly half closed or partially open or usually closed. And whatever is there in the cosmic consciousness, they enter the inner being, and from the inner being, they percolate into the outer being through these half closed channels. A little bit that percolates is considered to be responsible for our great creative arts, our great creative things, which we are very proud of to show that we are so very creative. They are actually they have come from the cosmic consciousness, and from the cosmic consciousness, whatever comes to the inner being, very little trickles through the channels to the outer being. These channels of communication are actually known, and they are called the chakras. But Sri-Aurobindo defines what is chakra. Chakra is the channel of communication between the inner being and the outer being. And then these channels of communication, if they could be opened, they could be then in the cosmic consciousness, whatever force is there could act more in our system. So that is how the chakra system came to be known and came to be open, and open from below upwards. And with the Kundalini opens from below upwards, the Kundalini power goes from below. We know this, all these things, that they from the base they travel to the head, and above the head, and they travel below upwards. But then what happens is that from the cosmic consciousness, as there are great positive waves, there are also great negative waves that can come. The cosmic consciousness is all things, has got great positive waves, has got great negative waves. And when these negative waves come, they can disrupt the whole thing. So the chakra system can, in the absence of good guides, it can be very disruptive. It can be very disruptive. So Sri Aurobindo points to another way of opening the chakra system, not from below upwards, but from above downwards. From the above downwards, from the superconscious force that comes down and opens the chakras which are necessary for each person, which might be different from each person to person, which might be very different from person to person. But then it comes down from above, it opens the chakras from above downwards, and the risk is not there. So this is one way of opening the chakras. But then Sri Aurobindo goes further. The inner, behind the inner being is the inmost being, and the inmost being has got two substances. One is the jivatma. We know that, but the jivatma projects something inside the manifestation. The jivatma is beyond the manifestation. Jivatma is behind and beyond the manifestation. It is not in the manifestation. And it projects something into the manifestation. That projection Sri Aurobindo calls the psychic being. The psychic being is a projection of the jivatma in the manifestation. Now, this is something which he called, which is totally new. It was something somewhat hinted at in the Upanishads. Somewhat it was something was hinted, but it was never developed. The Sri Aurobindo said something new together, that that a part of this jivatma is projected into the system, and that part takes part in evolution. That part takes part in evolution of consciousness. It evolves along with the consciousness, and with evolution, it develops into a psychic being, and that psychic being carries our inmost messages of our life, which are free from any bias. We are not linked with any ego. So there are moments of our life. Which are very beautiful moments, very intense moments, intensely deep moments, beautiful moments, turning points in life, or points in life which were of very great import to me. Psychologically, it was very important to me. Or there were these points which are linked with something of divinity. So all these things are stored in the psychic being. The psychic being doesn't store everything. Everything is not stored there. But these special moments in life, which are always illumining us, which are always guiding us, all these are noted down there, and they survive the individual lifespan, and they remain in the cosmic consciousness as memory traces. They remain in the cosmic consciousness, and somewhere afterwards they can come and they can join a person who is being born, or they can be manifested through many different persons at different times of life. Many ways they can become active afterwards. So these memories, so again in rebirth, in Sri Aurobindo's scheme, it's not that X is born as Y. It's not like that. X is not born as Y, because Sri Aurobindo says that the outer being is dissolved at birth, at death. Outer being, which is formed at birth, is dissolved at death. So it is not going to come back again. But the psychic being, the memories carried by the psychic being will always remain in the cosmic consciousness, and afterwards they can manifest in many different ways. So, for example, if there was a musician like Beethoven, his musical his musical memories, they are there in the cosmic consciousness. Afterwards, they can influence many people who are open to him at many different points in time. So that is also one kind of rebirth. Or as a whole, it can get connected with one person. One person, it can get connected with one person. It can come out like that. It can come out in many different ways. It can come out. It's the question of memories and the question of the cosmic evolution. So evolution is cosmic evolution. Sri Aurobindo's evolution is a cosmic evolution, and Sri Aurobindo's rebirth is a cosmic rebirth. So it is not an individual rebirth that Ram is identified as Sham next birth. Not like that. The memories remain in the cosmic consciousness as memory templates, and then afterwards they can come and they can influence future births in many different ways. It's not necessary that it has to be manifested through one person. It can be manifested through many persons, these memories. Of course, these memories have to be worked upon. If these memories are not worked upon, if they are not developed, then nothing will remain. Nothing will remain. Then we come to the evolution of consciousness. That brings up to the evolution of consciousness. Now, Sri-Aurobindo says that the evolution is something that is still going on. So human beings are transitional. Human beings are, Sri-Aurobindo says that human beings are transitional beings, So our mind is a transitional state. Beyond the mind, there are other minds that can be developed, that I told you. And how they can be developed? By an evolution of consciousness. By an evolution of consciousness, these things can be developed. And higher models of human being can evolve. So then you need higher, if you're open to this suggestion that higher models of human being need to evolve, then you have to be open to a psychology which is open-ended, which is catering to this new shifts in consciousness, because shifts are continuously happening in consciousness, and then you have to be open to that. Now, what is going to evolve? Well, then Sri-Aurobindo gives something very new. What is going to evolve? From inconscious, evolution takes place. But from the evolution is taking place from the inconscious. But anything cannot come out from zero. Sri-Aurobindo says that the inconscious carries the superconscious in a dormant form. The superconscious is there in a dormant form. The superconscious came down, down, and it came into the inconscious and got converted into opposite values. So light became darkness, life became death, happiness became sorrow, and pleasure became pain. All these things became opposite of what they were in the superconscious. And all these things came down, and in the inconscious they became opposite, and they lie in dormant. So inconscious is phenomenally inconscious. Now this answers one very important question in consciousness research today. Consciousness researchers are telling that we understand everything about consciousness. Only one thing we can't understand: how can consciousness, with so many qualities, colors, with so many structures, they can come out from inconscious. Inconscious means something where there is no consciousness, something from where you can say physics and chemistry can come out from that. But you cannot say that life with its color, life with its beauty, life with its grandeur, that cannot come out from there. How can it come out? So Sri-Aurobindo answers this question. It can come out because all things have become involved there. So before evolution, prior to evolution, there is a process of involution occurring. And involution occurring, so that evolution is how the principles get involved into the inconscious, so that from where they will evolve again. So the process of involving these superconscious things, when they come down into the inconscient, and then they will be released slowly during evolution. And when this involution is happening, that is also happening in a very systematic way. It is not anything haphazard. It is happening in a very systematic way. That supreme divine being is broken up, until it becomes particles at the level of the inconscious. It becomes particles at the level of matter. It becomes inconscious. It becomes particles. So when it is coming down, when it is breaking up, the personality is breaking down. And then the personality breaking down, you get non-evolutionary worlds. As there are evolutionary worlds, there are non-evolutionary worlds also. So the evolutionary world is matched by the non-evolutionary world. So in our universe, there are multiple universes. In our universe, we see we actually have multiple universes, multiverses. That is the evolutionary world, the evolutionary universe of which we are a part, which we know partly because we see in the scientific study of the evolution says the evolution of the forms, but it doesn't talk about evolution of the consciousness. That is why I am saying it is partly. But behind it, that is also the non-evolutionary worlds that is occurring during the involution of consciousness, when the non-evolutionary worlds were created. And for evolutionary world, there are non-evolutionary worlds also. And there are beings of the non-evolutionary world. And these beings are known in different cultures, in different ways. So the higher beings are known as gods, fairies, other things. The lower beings are known as the devil, Satan, Osura, Rakshasa, are the different terms used for the lower beings of the evolutionary world. But they are there. They are there, and there is a constant interaction between the evolutionary world and the evolutionary world. There is a constant interaction going. So these things make matters a bit complex, but truth is very complex. We have to understand truth in its complexity, not oversimplifying it, though the language might seem simplified because we have written it in such a way so that people can understand these things. And taking this what I have told you as the basis, as the fulcrum, then we have expanded this consciousness-based psychology to understand the different levels and planes of consciousness and how different problems arise at different planes and how solutions to different problems can be given at different planes of consciousness, number one. Number two, there is an occult dimension where the non-evolutionary planes are involved. The occult dimension has also occult problems of which we are unaware, which we do not know anything about much in scientific world, which we talk about when we talk about black magic and other things. Then we usually talk about some degraded version of that whole thing, which is something to be actually dismissed. But then there is actually an occult world where all these interactions occur, and you have to know this occult world and the interactions. Otherwise, understanding a person fully is not possible. Now, together with this, we have constructed how the ego is necessary. You see, ego is not looked as good or bad by Sri-Aurobindo. Ego is something necessary after a certain point of life. After a certain point, ego starts functioning in a biased way. You see, ego is, what is the ego? In Sri-Aurobindo's version, ego is the entity which is in the outer life. It is balancing the physical, vital, and the mental planes of consciousness. The physical, vital, and the mental planes of consciousness are not in harmony with each other. The mental plane of consciousness may want that today I will read philosophy, but the physical plane of consciousness may come with a headache and tell you not to read. So there is a battle going on between the three, and somehow they are being maintained by the ego, which is somehow maintaining the balance, but in a biased way. Why biased? Why it is the ego is biased? Again, ego is not looked in a bad way, not in a good and bad. Ego is biased way. Why? Because ego has not dropped from the sky like a meteorite into a system. Ego is made from these three things, from the physical, vital, and mental. It is made from these three things. And when it is made from these three things, then it is sometimes biased towards the intellect as in intellectuals. It is sometimes biased towards the vital, in very dynamic persons. It is very biased towards the physical, in sports persons, in people who are more concerned with the physical consciousness. For example, I would say I saw two ex-captains of India's two premier football teams, East Bengal and Mohun Bagan, few days back, and I found that they were suffering physically, and they were having actually more suffering than people who are not players. People who are not players, if they had the same disease, these people were suffering more, and they were players. And we always know that if you play, we will be. If you play, if you do physical exercises, we should be sufficiently healthy. But this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen, mind you. They also suffer from ill health. Sports persons suffer from ill health, all diseases, because the main thing is not developing one thing. Of course, as sports persons, they have to develop their health more. But for us, ordinary people, it is the balance between the physical, vital, and the mental, which is more important. The balance is more important. So like that, the intellectual ego is biased. The physical, the dynamic persons, for the dynamic persons, their vital ego is very biased. And therefore, what was the solution? One solution was to kick out the ego. In India, the solution was kick out the ego. The ego is such a problematic thing. Kick out the ego. Egolessness. Go to egolessness. That is very good. But when you go to egolessness, you don't have psychology as a subject. You have only spirituality, because the whole system has gone down. Ego is not there. Then you cannot live in this society. You have to go to the jungle and live. You have to go to the forest and live like a recluse. So, what is the solution? What is the solution? The solution, you see, the world had to wait for so many thousands of years before Sri-Aurobindo came and gave a solution. His solution was, if the ego is bad, instead of kicking out the ego, replace the ego. Replace the ego by something which is more harmonious, which is more better, which can balance the physical, vital, and mental more beautifully, which is the psychic being. What I told you, that the Jivatma projects one portion of it into the manifestation, and that is called the psychic being. And Sri Aurobindo said that the psychic being can be developed and can be brought forward, and it can replace the ego. The inner being and the outer being can fuse, and it can replace the ego, and then one can have a more harmonious life, one can have a more beautiful life. So this is a very important thing in consciousness-based psychology, how to develop the psychic being, or the inner essence of the individual, the inmost essence of the individual, how to develop it. And to develop it, it cannot come out unless the instruments are also prepared. So the instruments are the physical, vital, and the mental. The instruments have to be prepared. If the instruments are not ready, it cannot act like that. So the instruments have to be developed. The inner being, the instruments have to be developed. For developing the instruments properly, one has to shift from the outer being to the inner being, and then the inmost being can come forward and can replace the ego, and then one can have a personality which is more beautiful, which is more harmonious, which is not biased. So that is one very beautiful thing, that what you call the replacement of the ego by the psychic being is necessary. But at the present moment, both the ego and the psychic being are both there. It is not going to come as a magic. The psychic being is not going to come in a magic, but you can develop the psychic being while the ego is still there. The psychic being can be developed. It will take some time. It might take one life. It might take more than one life. But it doesn't matter. The work has to be done, and the ego and the psychic being can together be there. And ultimately, the point comes when the psychic being takes over the ego, and we can shift from the lower nature to the higher nature. Para Prakriti, Apara Prakriti, we have always known in the Indian system. So this is something also which is very important. And yes, I should stop now.
No, please go ahead. Please complete your.
So how many minutes I have?
You have 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have some question answers.
So we have tried to deal with all these aspects in this book, and then we have got sequences of the physical, vital, and the mental, and the disturbances they have in the different planes of consciousness, and how these disturbances can be detected. And you see, there is a classification of disease which we use in psychiatry, in mental health. We have a classification of diseases, but together with that official classification, we have a consciousness classification, where we see things developing in consciousness, we see things developing in the problems developing in the inner being, and the outer being follows suit. So that inner being has to be known, because the primary problem in the inner being can be corrected at the outer being also, and also the inner being. Both you need correction at both levels, both the outer being and the inner being. And how this can be done at the physical, vital, and the mental consciousness, at the subconscious, at the inconscious, and the superconscious. Also, people who are hooked to spirituality, they are also not free from these things. And regarding occultism, I will say a few things, that in occultism we are dealing with the negative forces in the cosmic consciousness. In positive forces in the cosmic consciousness are there, and negative forces are also there in the cosmic consciousness. When these negative forces enter an individual, you see, when a person becomes open to the cosmic consciousness, then he is open simultaneously to positive and negative forces. He is open simultaneously to positive and negative forces. And if the whole development has not been done properly, what happens is the negative forces can come and enter a human being and can go in two directions. One, it can go forward, it can catch hold of the ego and make the person a diabolical person. You see, sometimes in people who do yoga, people who become sadhus, who are very sincere in the beginning, and they were, because they are very sincere, that cosmic consciousness, they open into the cosmic consciousness more easily than others, and then they run the risk of the negative forces entering and going ahead and catching their what do you call, catching their ego and making them vulnerable to all sorts of personality lapses. So you might see frequently that a person starts with a great claim of being a great yogi, but afterwards we have all uh, mighty defamations against that person. So it is not unusual for a person to fall into that trap. Or the negative forces can come and they can make a shadow, they can make a curtain between the inner being and the inmost being, or between the soul and the inner being. They can make a curtain so that the soul cannot influence the inner being anymore or the outer being anymore. The soul cannot influence either the inner being or the outer being anymore. So there is a curtain that is formed. That is the real position. In Sri Aurobindo's system, real position is that this entry of the negative force of the cosmic consciousness into the system and forming a veil between the inmost being and the rest of the being. So all these things are very dealt with in this book, and that is the case of um, Hitler being given, how Hitler was a possessed soul, and how steps were taken by Sri Aurobindo and the mother to counter Hitler, which is not known outside, which is it is very little discussed outside, but what steps actually they had taken at the occult level so that he would be cut off from the rest of the world. So that steps they had taken, and that is also given in this book.
Thank you,
Okay, I think.
Dr. Saumitra ji. It was really a very enriching session. And, your book and your lecture is a kind of invitation for all of us to revisit the work of Sri-Aurobindo. And, in Sri-Aurobindo, it is, it is a collection of all paradigms of psychological theory building. And from psychiatrist's point of view, that is also one of the applied aspects, be it from consciousness understanding and an understanding of health, so self and society. So it was a kind of enriching session. And now I request respected participant to please raise his or her question, or you can indicate me in the chat box. Meanwhile, we can invite Pooja Soni. Pooja Soni is one of our co-nurturer of Vishwaneedam, and she has a deep interest in self and consciousness and that aspect of psychology. So we invite Pooja Soni to please share some of her reflections.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you are all.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a very nice talk. I would like to ask you a few questions, but let me just start with this simple, question about the nature of the being. What are your views about the beingness of the being? Is it physical, vital, or mental? From this work, I would like to ask you that question to start off with. And my second question would be regarding the ego maintaining the physical, mental, and the vital, but it is also, you say, it is also formed out of these three aspects of life. So does it not seem circular in this sense? How can something which is created by three different things, also maintain those things. And finally, I would like to be thankful for your remarks regarding the negative aspects of the being or the ego, because these things, the negative sides of spirituality, are discussed very less. I mean, spirituality has been hailed for its positive effects, but people do not see the negative side of being obsessed with, let's say, practices like yoga or spirituality. So I'm very thankful uh, for you for explaining this side of the beingness of the being. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just comment on two and three aspects. The last aspect first that I left out because time was less. And we have a chapter on the effects of the psychopathological effects of spirituality. And spirituality, people who go for spirituality, they have got psychiatric and mental health problems for very different reasons. For example, there is that people who are not trained very much, or people who are not prepared, not ready, and suddenly they pull down a force, and then that becomes disruptive. And then the inner being can progress faster than the outer being. What happens? The inner being can progress faster than the outer being, and that can cause a great problem in yogis. Many yogis, these problems arise. And also there is between the inner being and the outer being, there is a gap. There's an intermediate zone. So some people some yogis might get stuck up in that intermediate zone between the inner being and the outer being, and they become prone to hallucinations, delusions, all these things. All these things are there. So it is a very big subject, and it's a very complex subject, but it is very important to know that these things can happen. Regarding the physical, mental, vital, the first question what you said, that Sri-Aurobindo views the thing as an integral being, where the physical is the first to evolve from the inconscious, and then the vital evolves, and then the mental evolves. And the three are equally important. The three are equally important to him. And because the ego from the beginning, you see that from the inconscious, when these three were beginning to form the being, then there was a structure that was needed. A structure was needed to support that. Then you see, we need a structure a scaffolding. We need a scaffolding to support an image of Durga. When we make the Durga image, we need a scaffolding to make a Durga image. So in the unconscious, a scaffolding was needed to make this physical, vital, and mental, they together to form a being. And that scaffolding becomes the ego. The scaffolding becomes the ego, and the scaffolding is made from these three. So in a sense that it is circular, as you said, that it can be considered to be circular, as you said. But these three things the components are there. The physical, vital, and mental ego are different types of ego, and they have to be dealt very differently. For example, you can deal with the mental ego. You can deal with the mental ego by coming out of your intellectual biases and prejudices. You can deal with the vital ego by controlling your desires, or you go to the Buddhist way of controlling your desires. It's something you can do with the vital ego. But with the physical ego is necessary to maintain the physical consciousness. To do away with the physical ego is very difficult. Mother was trying this experiment to do away with the physical ego, but without disrupting the physical consciousness. And she said that it was very dangerous. A point had come when it could be this, it could be that, means her life would have been taken away. And then she had to invoke the destructive power of Shiva to destroy that physical ego connection. You see, it was not with herself alone, but with the help of the Shiva's destructive power, that she could destroy that physical ego without disrupting her physical substance. So it is very difficult. It's a very difficult question, and very difficult to understand also. All these things about ego are very difficult to understand. And when the ego has been won over, Sri-Aurobindo said, then still there is a sub-threshold ego which remains, and fake impression of the ego remains. And many yogis, Sri-Aurobindo said, they come to that sub-threshold ego and they think that they have come to the Brahma. So ego is a very difficult subject, very complex, very difficult subject.
Thank you so much for your response. I think in the present situation in the West, at least in the field of consciousness, people are obsessed with intellectualism, and it's so nice to hear from people like you, because in the East, at least, we acknowledge the embodied side of being. You know, like in the West, the consciousness studies, you take any theory of consciousness like OR or all of these theories are idealist, but at least in the East, we acknowledge the embodied side of a being. That would be my final remark, and thank you.
Thank you.
Please unmute yourself and please ask. As he is taking some time, Miniti Pradhan.
Hello, am I audible? Hello. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Saumitra Basu, for very, insightful and detailed presentation. As we're telling rightly, that ego has to be balanced. For those things, now psychologists are now realizing the power of positivity, positive self-talk, the power of one's ability. The power of one's ability is the power of our own mind. While reading some article, I just came across like Shiva Sankalpa Suktam, the hymn of noble thoughts, how we can transform our consciousness into the noble thoughts. Like they described 6 mantras for that, empowering in the empowering way. Just quickly, I just to say those things. The first one says the incredible speed at which the mind moves takes the light of all the light. As you were telling, it is like the spotlight in the dark. You were mentioning somewhere. So, and the second one, it can perform all the rituals very brilliantly. If we train our mind, it is like it is root of all the actions. The third one is the mind is the instrument that makes possible to acquire all the knowledge. The fourth one is it is only through the mind we can think in the present. We should live in the present, not brood over the past, and we can imagine the future. So the fifth one is the highest knowledge is possible only due to mind. They say Veda is the highest knowledge. Probably one can acquire all the knowledge through this. And the sixth one is the mind is, is a good, what you say, that charioteer. It steers the upliftment of the, so it can transform into divine being. My question is now, all this, apart from all this, can consciousness be fooled? If, some article says it can be, but how? And how we can measure the consciousness? Sorry, I have so many queries. Actually, I wanted to ask you, as a psychiatric practitioner, how do you convince people or your patients to use their consciousness for their recovery? Do you use chakra cleaning and energizing therapy? Or do you believe in the past life regression therapy? So these were my queries. Thank you.
No, what you have said is correct about the mind, because the mind is our leader and the mind is the charioteer. And about the therapy part, it is very complex. It is a very complex thing about chakra cleaning and all that. According to the older version of this chakra cleaning, this going from below upwards, unless there is a good guide available, which became absent in Tantra. In Tantra, what happened, that good guides become absent after a certain point of time. Then people can lapse into problems, because from the cosmic consciousness, the negative forces can come inside and come to the chakra. So that Sri-Aurobindo recommends opening from above downwards. Above downwards removes the risk of these negative things coming and dominating the show. And when it comes from above downwards, it opens the chakras which are necessary for each individual, which is different from each individual, from individual to individual. For me, chakra X and Y might be important. For you, chakra Z and W might be important. So the chakras will open according to their needs of the individual. And then, of course, after the descent, there is an ascent of consciousness that will happen afterwards. But this method is more authentic, is much better, and it can be carried on even without you being conscious of the chakras. Even if you are not conscious of the chakras, you are conscious of the higher force coming down inside your system. Then also the work will be done. So it is a much better way of chakra. Of awakening of chakras than the older method, which was good, but which came into disrepute because the expert guides were absent after some time in Tantra. So this is one thing that is important. About the other things that you told, that there are general things. What you said is correct. I agree with you that our mind is something which we have to think over, but together with the mind, what I was saying about the vital and the body, they are also important. Like the body has got the cells, and the cells have got the cellular consciousness of the is a new thing which was developed by the mother, and where each cell has got its own mind, each cell has got its own position, its own uniqueness, and it can contribute to the whole. It can contribute to the whole, but we are not aware of the importance of the cell. So the cellular consciousness, the subtle body, that has to be developed very differently than our usual ways of knowing and developing them. Usual ways of knowing and developing them is through the Hatha Yoga techniques, which is very good, but up to a certain extent it is good. It doesn't. Hatha Yoga utilizes the universal life energy and increases the individual life energy by infusing the cosmic consciousness, cosmic energy into it. But consciousness of the cells goes further, where you are working with the cells and the mentality of the cells, the consciousness of the cells, what the cells are wanting. They can also want something. They can also demand something. They can also plan something. So that is something very new, and that has to be developed. Otherwise, this whole work of this new building, new creation, which we want, will not happen.
Yes. So we request any other participant if he has or she has any question. Meanwhile, we can invite Professor Tejaswini Patil and then Dr. Gyan Guri. Yes, Professor Tejaswini.
Hello, sir. I have been listening to the session very carefully, but I'm not so well. So I'm lying here and listening to the session. I'm very thankful to you to invite me for that, but I'm enlightened by the speech. That's what I can say here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we are also, yes, Dr. Gyan.
Yes. Am I audible? Because I have some problems with the connection. Unfortunately, the video is not functioning, but anyway, I can speak. I thank you very much. It was really very interesting, and I collected many materials. The first impression which I have is, and it is the impression which I always have when I read something of Aurobindo, or when I listen at exposition about his philosophy, that he has extraordinary analogies with some points of Plato or Plotinus, that is the conception, for instance, of the cosmic energy, or the inner and outer being, are all points which I can find in Plato also in a different way and with a different intensity. But this always strikes me. And I think it could be, of course, fruitful to organize something in order to compare these thinkers with each other, because I think it could bring very, very, very fruits, for instance, as regards the comprehension of some points of ancient Greek philosophy which are left out of attention, in my opinion at least. That is, Aurobindo could help us very much in order to understand many points of ancient Greek philosophy which, for a reason which I have not understood, are not so much considered in our times when in the studies of ancient Greek philosophy. Well, perhaps my question would be regard the conception of the supermind, because also here I see that the supermind is, so to speak, that is, the individual has the potentiality to reach the supermind. And also here there are analogies also with other languages and with other concepts, but with Plato, because, but anyway, it would be too long to speak about the comparison between the two thinkers. But what strikes me is also the way in which that is, what precisely, if I can put the question, what precisely should the individual do in order to free the potentiality for the conjunction and for the connection with the supermind? That is, which is the thread which the individual should do in order to free this potentiality for the connection and access to the supermind which the individual has. This would be my question. But of course, very many questions could be posed, and I thank you very much for your brilliant and really rich and enlightening analysis of the thinker. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Two things I will tell you, that as I said, that these supracognitive matrices, it is time for us in our education system to now shift from the mind to the higher mind, which is a mind of mass ideation, where all ideas which are which might be opposite or which might be the same, they remain together. Complementary or contradictory, all ideas remain together. That is the level of the mind where all ideas remain together, contradictory and complementary, and without one undermining the other. So that is the level, the first level. The first level of this subtle mind is to shift to the mind of the ideas, where all ideas, complementary and contradictory, are equally present. And it is very necessary for us now to shift to that, because when one shifts to that mind, then one is free from all types of dogmatic thinking and all sorts of what you call today's world, where we are seeing that one type of people forcing their ideas on another type of people, leading to propaganda, leading to armed conflicts, leading to so many things. But all these things can be got off in a struck, in a strike. It can be got off if we can shift from our present level of thinking to a higher level of mind, where all ideas are equally present, and therefore nothing undermines the other. So that is one thing. About the supermind, I would say that it is, I have not talked about it much, because it will go something beyond this seminar, beyond this webinar. But the supermind is the mind where the programming of the whole world takes place. You see, in India, there was always a problem, how one became the many. It is always said that the one consciousness became the many. But how one became the many was never known. Swami Vivekananda has also said that how one became the many, they use the word Maya, but Maya is a descriptive term, not an explanatory term. If an explanation was given, it would solve a problem which 3,000 years people have not been able to solve. And Sri-Aurobindo solves that problem by bringing in the concept of the supermind between the one and the many, where the one is programmed to be the many. The supermind is our mind, where the one is programmed to be the many. It's like the software programming is made, where the one is programmed to become the many. And we can reach the supermind. In an evolutionary consciousness, we can reach the supermind. And when we reach the supermind, then we have the Gnostic community, we have the Gnostic people, we have our transformation will take place when we go back to the supermind. But it is not going to be an easy thing. It will take several centuries to go there. But that is also possible. But this thing is best left for a different webinar because it needs a different kind of building up.
Thank you. We'll invite you for other further enriching sessions. And we'll invite you, Professor Gyangloi, also. So we request Professor Anant Kumar Giri to give a chair remark of the session. We are running out of the time, but we are very eager to listen more and more insightful dimensions of Sri-Aurobindo's life lessons philosophy. So, Ananta bhai, over to you.
Thank you so much, dear Ranveer. Thank you, Dr. Basu, and all friends for present. So, unfortunately, somehow, being on the road, I misread your timing as 9, and it started at 8:30. So I have listened only part of your presentation. So thank you for this. At the same time, as we are with Sri-Aurobindo and psychology and also transpersonal psychology, some themes still invite us for consideration. And when we talk about Sri-Aurobindo and psychology, of course, people try to understand Sri-Aurobindo and Abraham Maslow together. And what are the points of conversations. When we talk about ego psychology has a long pedigree in psychological thinking, starting from Freud and Adler and others. And so what are the different ways of conversation between Sri-Aurobindo psychology and this kind of psychological methodology and insight? This is the first thing. Secondly, in terms of psychopathology, what you referred to, also I wonder there can be some fruitful dialogue between a new kind of therapy, not so new though, what Viktor Frankl called as logotherapy or soul therapy. Now, Sri-Aurobindo's soul psychology, not much conversation has happened between, at least in professional psychology, it seems, between Viktor Frankl and Sri-Aurobindo. So my query would be in what way it can be taken further, though we might take note here that Chittaranjan Das, he was a deep thinker and seeker. He had studied with Viktor Frankl, and as well as he had a deep journey with Sri-Aurobindo. But it seems Chittabai himself has not written much about Viktor Frankl and Sri-Aurobindo, but the soul psychology and soul therapy, logotherapy. And the soul psychology and the logotherapy is not just individualistic, because your attention to transpersonal psychology, it points to that how we can have psychology in a transpersonal way, similarly therapy in a transpersonal way. So Sri-Aurobindo's pointed to what he calls as Gnostic communities or collective yoga. So how we can have a transpersonal psychology, which also needs to be supplemented by transpersonal sociology. So, and that transpersonal psychology and sociology, the kind of structures they would have ego and transcendence of ego. You very rightly mentioned the necessity for ego. And you said that, without ego, we cannot stay in the social life, we would have to go to jungle. But still, what is the nature of ego? we have ego, but how can we have an egoless ego? And so therefore, being with ego and society, how are we continuously in the process of transcendence? So these are some of my submissions as I heard part of your presentations, please.
Yes. Thank you, Ananta bhai. So we request Dr. Saumitra for his last remark, and then we'll offer vote of thanks with the help of Miniti Pradhanji.
Now, what Professor Giri has told is very interesting, very right. Isolated works have been done on these things, what you said. Not much is known outside the limited circles of, but Sri-Aurobindo's whole thing that comprises this transcendence of the ego, replacement of the ego by the psychic being, which is very important. Understanding the psychic being is very important, which can replace the ego, and then understanding the psychic being, which is a projection of the Jivatma, which is behind the manifestation, beyond the manifestation, and the psychic being is projected by the Jivatma into the manifestation, and how the psychic being develops from a spark, it develops into a being through evolution. That is an important concept. And then the psychic being can replace the ego. You see, the ego has to be replaced at one point in time, and that replacement has to be done by the psychic being. And if the psychic being is brought forward, the ego can go to its own part where it is there and remain. That is a much what you call safer thing than trying to break the ego to bring the psychic being, because breaking the ego might need several lives, and bringing the psychic being forward might be more dynamic, and so that will solve many problems. So the concept of the psychic being has to be discussed. That is not discussed because it is usually kept as part of the yoga, so that is usually not discussed in professional circles. What you say is true, that this Jivatma alone cannot do that. The psychic being, the part of the Jivatma, can actually do that part of repressing the ego. But this is what he has correctly said, Professor Giri, that this is not discussed, but these things we are bringing in the front for the first time in a methodical way. But these things are usually not discussed, and that is why the communication gap remains. There are other things also. There are other works also, which you mentioned, but this whole philosophy of consciousness and Sri-Aurobindo psychology revolves around the psychic being made first prominent, and thereafter the other things will follow. So that is very important.
Yes, so before offering the vote of thanks, so we have just gifted this book to Professor Ananta Kumarji, and so he has some words for Somaiya ji and all participants present here. So, yes.
It's a great joy for me, a student of society and culture, and an admirer of Sri-Aurobindo's contributions, to receive this book through my friend Randir Gautamji at Gwalior. In fact, this book came to me
एकदम खतरनाक वाले दिन तेरा सब पूरा दिन भर का एक तो काम का बहुत चल रही बात है मेरे पापा इतने गुस्से में थे हमको सुना दिए दम भर हम बोल रहे थे.
This is an exercise.
I request respected participant to please mute yourself. Yes.
To express my joy, I must say that this is a very important interdisciplinary invitation from two outstanding psychologists from two corners of the world, India and USA. For all of us, it is also an opportunity to revisit some of the ideas of Sri-Aurobindo, who has been, in a way, maker of Indian nation by analyzing our history and culture and underlining the foundations of Indian civilizational unity. It is fundamental thinkers need some time to be appreciated, and these two scholars have done the job so beautifully in this book. I invite all of you to join me in reading this book and continuing the exploration as underlined by these two scholars. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I request Miniti Pradhanji to offer vote of thanks.
Thank you, Randir. I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Sadhya Sahachakra and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, would like to thank our today's chief speaker, Dr. Saumitra Basu, and congratulate him for that release of the new book. Thank you, sir, so much. We learned a lot today regarding psychiatry and consciousness. Thank you so much. I would like to thank our moderator, Professor Kumar Giri, for arranging or giving the topics which is taking us to different dimensions every week, of course. Thank you, Ananta bhai. And I would like to thank today's special guest, Professor Anand Kumarji, being present with us and giving his very valuable opinion. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Madam Pooja Soni, Professor Gyan Luigi, and all online platform participants and our Facebook viewers, our YouTube viewers. Thank you all for being present with us. Please pardon me if I have forgotten anybody's name. At the last, not the least, I would like to thank our convener, Professor Randir Kumar Gautam, for arranging and executing all these programs so well. Here somebody is lifting the hand. Somebody wants to say something, Suraj Junarkar. Randir, you can allow him to talk something. He wants to say something.
Yes, Suraj, please unmute and ask.
Sir, I am asking from telepathy and psychological difference.
Okay. So thank you. Although we are running out of the time, so we'll invite him, Dr. Basu, again for explaining so many important quests for this book and psychological thought of Sri-Aurobindo. So thank you so much, and we look forward for your kind engagement in our coming blogs. Thank
you, Dr. Basu. Thank you, Randir. Thank you, Professor Anand Kumar. Thank you, Minati. You put your video on at the last moment. Thank you.